My beloved child. Stop scrolling for just a moment. Something is waiting for you inside these words, and the timing of this message is more important than you realize. You may have arrived here casually. You may have been scrolling without expecting anything unusual. But there is a reason your eyes stopped here. There is a reason your heart felt even the smallest pull to listen. What you are about to hear is a fictionalized spiritual message created for inspiration and entertainment, but within this story, imagine heaven opening a door for you at the exact moment you needed it most. Something has happened. And your soulmate is not handling it the way they thought they would. Right now, somewhere beyond the silence between you, there is a person carrying an emotion they have been trying desperately to hide. They have been pretending to be calm. They have been telling themselves that they are fine. They have been going through ordinary moments while something extraordinary has been happening inside their heart. And tonight, that hidden emotion has reached a point where it can no longer remain buried. Pause here for a moment, because this is where the story begins to change. There was a moment recently when your soulmate received something they never expected. It may have been a message, a photograph, a conversation, a memory, a sudden encounter, or information about you that reached them through an unexpected path. Whatever form it took, it struck a place inside them that they had carefully protected. They were not prepared. They thought they had control over their emotions. They were wrong. The first reaction was silence. Not because they had nothing to say. Because they had too much to say. They looked at what was in front of them, and for a few seconds, everything around them seemed to disappear. The noise of the world became distant. Their thoughts became louder than everything else. They remembered your voice. They remembered the way you looked at them. They remembered moments they once dismissed as ordinary. And suddenly, those moments did not feel ordinary anymore. They felt like pieces of a story they had misunderstood. My beloved child, there are moments in life when a person does not realize the value of something until circumstances force them to look at it differently. Your soulmate has entered one of those moments. They have been asking themselves questions they avoided for a long time. Why did I walk away? Why did I stay silent? Why did I pretend I did not care? Why did I allow distance to grow between us? And the most painful question of all has been slowly rising above the others. What if I waited too long? That question has been following them. It followed them into the night. It followed them when they tried to sleep. It followed them when they picked up their phone and then put it down again. It followed them when they saw something that reminded them of you. And today, something happened that made that question impossible to ignore. They discovered something about you. Something they did not expect. Something that changed the way they have been looking at your entire connection. And before you assume this is simply about missing someone, listen carefully, because it goes deeper than that. They did not simply discover that they miss you. They discovered that they may have misunderstood you. For a long time, they may have believed that your silence meant you had moved on. They may have interpreted your distance as indifference. They may have convinced themselves that you no longer cared. But what reached them recently challenged that belief. And when they realized it, their heart sank. Because suddenly, the silence between you looked completely different. They began remembering every time you tried to communicate without actually saying what was inside your heart. They remembered your patience. They remembered your eyes during difficult conversations. They remembered the moments when you could have walked away permanently, yet somehow you remained emotionally present. They remembered things they thought they had forgotten. And one particular memory hit them harder than the others. It was not necessarily the biggest moment you shared. It may have been something incredibly small. A sentence. A look. A simple gesture. A moment when you were beside them and neither of you understood how important that moment would become. That memory returned with such clarity that they had to stop what they were doing. They asked themselves why they were suddenly remembering it. And that is when another realization appeared. You were never as easy to forget as they had pretended. My child, sometimes the heart knows the truth long before the mind is willing to accept it. Your soulmate has been trying to reason with an emotion that refuses to disappear. They told themselves they were being nostalgic. They told themselves they were lonely. They told themselves they were simply remembering the past. But something inside them knew better. Because this feeling did not behave like ordinary nostalgia. It became stronger when they tried to suppress it. It became louder when they distracted themselves. It became more painful when they convinced themselves that you no longer cared. And then came the event that changed everything. Someone mentioned you. Perhaps your name appeared unexpectedly. Perhaps someone showed them something connected to you. Perhaps they came across a picture, a post, a message, or information that they were never supposed to see at that particular moment. Whatever happened, the result was the same. They froze. They stared. And deep inside, something broke open. Not in a destructive way. In a revealing way. They suddenly realized that while they had been trying to understand what happened between you, they had never truly understood what was happening inside themselves. They had been protecting their pride. Protecting their image. Protecting themselves from vulnerability. But none of those defenses could protect them from the truth they were feeling now. They need you. Not because they cannot survive without you. Not because you are responsible for fixing their life. But because there is something unfinished between your hearts. There is a conversation that never happened. There is an apology that remained trapped behind pride. There is a truth that was swallowed because fear was louder. And now that truth is demanding to be heard. Listen closely. Your soulmate has been standing at an emotional crossroads. One direction leads back into the familiar pattern of silence, avoidance, pride, and pretending. The other direction requires courage. It requires them to admit that they were wrong about certain things. It requires them to acknowledge that they hurt you. It requires them to risk hearing an answer they may not be ready for. And that is why they are afraid. They are not afraid of loving you. They are afraid of discovering whether you still have room for them in your heart. That distinction matters. Because there was a time when they assumed you would always be there. They assumed the connection would somehow survive every misunderstanding. They assumed that even if they disappeared, delayed, ignored, or hesitated, some invisible thread would remain exactly where they left it. But something changed. You changed. Your energy changed. Your patience changed. Your expectations changed. And perhaps without realizing it, you stopped waiting for someone else to decide your worth. That is what frightened them. Because when they sensed that you were no longer standing at the same emotional door, waiting for them to knock, they suddenly understood the cost of their hesitation. They realized that your heart could move forward without them. And that possibility shook them. They may never admit it immediately. They may hide it behind normal behavior. They may appear completely unaffected. But inside, they are asking themselves a question that keeps becoming heavier. What if someone else recognizes what I failed to recognize? What if another person sees your kindness? What if another person appreciates your loyalty? What if another person understands your silence? What if another person gives you the certainty they were too afraid to give? That thought has been painful for them. Not because they believe they own you. But because they are finally recognizing your value. And recognition often arrives painfully late. My beloved child, this is where the spiritual story becomes deeper. Imagine, within this fictional narrative, that the heavens are not forcing two people together. Instead, they are illuminating truths that both people have been avoiding. You are being shown what your soulmate has been unable to say. And they are being shown what they could lose by continuing to remain silent. This is not a promise that someone must return. It is a story about awakening. Because sometimes the greatest miracle is not a reunion. Sometimes the miracle is finally seeing clearly. And your soulmate is beginning to see. They are beginning to understand that love was not the problem. Fear was. Timing was. Pride was. Unspoken expectations were. And perhaps the greatest obstacle was the belief that there would always be another chance. They thought tomorrow would come. They thought there would always be another conversation. Another opportunity. Another moment to explain. Another night to send the message. Another day to apologize. But then something happened that made tomorrow feel uncertain. That is the part they cannot stop thinking about. They received news or witnessed something that made them realize your life was moving. Your world was continuing. And suddenly, they felt the urgency they had avoided. They wanted to reach out. Their fingers may have hovered over your name. They may have opened the conversation. They may have typed something. Then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted it again. Because how do you begin a conversation after so much silence? Hi feels too small. I miss you feels too vulnerable. I'm sorry feels incomplete. I need to talk to you feels frightening. So they stared at the screen. And for a moment, they imagined what would happen if you answered. Then they imagined what would happen if you did not. That second possibility hurt more than they expected. This is why the urgency in this story matters. Something inside them has shifted from maybe someday to I cannot keep waiting. They are realizing that some doors do not remain open forever. And yet, there is something else you need to know. They are not only thinking about contacting you. They are thinking about what they would say if they actually got the chance. They have rehearsed conversations in their mind. They have imagined sitting across from you. They have imagined looking into your eyes. They have imagined finally telling you the truth. And in those imagined conversations, they keep returning to one sentence. I was scared. Not, I didn't care. Not, I forgot you. Not, you meant nothing. I was scared. Scared of being rejected. Scared of being vulnerable. Scared of needing someone. Scared that loving you would require them to change. Scared that if they gave you their whole heart, you would eventually discover every imperfect part of them and leave. So instead of risking love, they risked losing it. That is the tragedy they are beginning to understand. And now they are wondering whether the damage can still be repaired. They are wondering if your heart has already closed. They are wondering if you have forgiven them. They are wondering whether you ever think about them anymore. And there is one thought that keeps returning. What if they are waiting for me to make the first move? That thought gives them hope. Then another thought destroys the hope. What if they stopped waiting because I waited too long? Back and forth. Hope. Fear. Courage. Doubt. Hope again. This emotional battle has become exhausting. And then tonight, something unexpected happens. They see a reminder of you at the exact moment they are thinking about reaching out. It feels almost too perfectly timed. They stop. They look at it. And for the first time, they do not immediately run away from the feeling. They allow themselves to remember. They remember the warmth. They remember the tension. They remember the laughter. They remember the disagreements. They remember the silence afterward. They remember the moment they knew they cared more than they wanted to admit. And then they remember something else. The last time they saw you. The last words. The last expression on your face. The last moment before distance became the new normal. And suddenly, regret enters the room. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just heavy. The kind of regret that makes a person stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. The kind that makes someone ask, why didn't I just say it? Why didn't I tell them I loved them? Why didn't I explain? Why did I let pride win? Why did I assume they would understand without being told? Why did I think silence would protect me? And then the deepest realization arrives. You were never asking them to be perfect. You were asking them to be honest. That realization hurts. Because honesty would have required courage. And courage was exactly what they were missing. My child, there is another layer to this story that you must hear. Your soulmate may have allowed other voices to influence their decisions. Someone may have told them to move on. Someone may have encouraged them to stop looking back. Someone may have convinced them that your connection was too complicated. Someone may have told them that you were not thinking about them anymore. And perhaps your soulmate listened. Perhaps they tried to follow that advice. But now they are questioning it. Because advice from others cannot silence what the heart has not resolved. They may have laughed with other people. They may have gone out. They may have distracted themselves. They may have appeared happy. But none of that answered the question inside them. Why does your memory still have this power? Why does hearing your name change their mood? Why does seeing something connected to you create an emotional reaction they cannot explain? Why do they still imagine what life would look like if the two of you had handled everything differently? These questions have become impossible to escape. And now comes the part you were not expecting. The person who told them to let you go may soon become part of the reason they finally face the truth. Because your soulmate is about to learn something. Something that may completely change the story they have been telling themselves. They are going to discover that the version of your life they believed in was incomplete. They thought they knew what you were doing. They thought they knew how you felt. They thought they knew whether you had moved on. But they did not. And when they learn the missing piece, their reaction will be immediate. They will not know whether to feel relieved or devastated. Because the truth will give them hope and fear at the same time. It will tell them that the door may not be completely closed. But it will also tell them that they cannot keep standing outside it forever. That is why this moment matters. The next step will require action. Not fantasy. Not signs. Not endless waiting. Action. And your soulmate knows it. They are beginning to understand that if they want another chance, they must stop expecting the universe to do the difficult part for them. They must speak. They must admit. They must risk. They must become vulnerable. But before they do that, there is one final thing they need to know about you. And this is where the story becomes almost impossible for them to process. Because what they are about to discover is not that you forgot them. It is not that you hate them. It is not that you are waiting desperately. It is something far more powerful. They are about to realize that you learned how to live without needing them to validate your worth. And that realization changes everything. Because the person they remember from the past may have waited for their attention. But the person standing in your present has learned to choose peace. That difference will force them to approach you differently. They cannot simply return with the same behavior. They cannot expect you to accept half-truths. They cannot knock on your emotional door and demand that everything return to the way it was. If they come back, they will have to come back honestly. And they know that. This is why their heart is shaking. Because the connection they once treated casually now feels precious. The opportunity they once assumed would remain available now feels fragile. The person they once thought would always be there now feels wonderfully independent. And the more they realize this, the stronger their desire becomes to reach you. But there is still one obstacle. They are afraid you will ask the question they have no easy answer for. Why now? Why did you wait? Why did you disappear? Why did you let me hurt? Why did you allow so much time to pass? Why did you only realize my value after losing access to me? They know these questions are coming. And they are preparing themselves. They have been thinking about the truth they need to tell you. Not the polished version. Not the version that makes them look innocent. The real version. The version where they admit their mistakes. The version where they admit they were jealous. The version where they admit they cared. The version where they admit they were afraid. The version where they admit that sometimes they pushed you away because being close to you made their feelings too real. That confession has been sitting inside them, waiting. And tonight, something is pushing it closer to the surface. My beloved child, within this fictional spiritual story, imagine that an unseen light is illuminating the path ahead. Not to force an outcome. Not to guarantee a reunion. But to reveal what has been hidden. And what is hidden is finally beginning to move. Your soulmate has reached the point where silence no longer feels safe. They need an answer. They need clarity. They need to know whether the connection they still feel exists only inside their memories or whether something remains between you. That is why they need you now. Not because you must rescue them. Not because you must abandon your boundaries. Not because you should chase them. They need the truth that only an honest conversation can provide. And perhaps, for the first time, they are ready to hear it. But there is something else happening behind the scenes. Someone else knows. Someone close to your soulmate has noticed the change. They have seen the way your soulmate reacts when your name appears. They have noticed the sudden silence. They have noticed the questions. They have noticed that your soulmate is not as detached as they pretend. And recently, this person asked a question. A simple question. A dangerous question. Do you still love them? Your soulmate did not answer immediately. That silence said more than words could have. The person asking already knew. But they wanted to hear it. Your soulmate looked away. They tried to laugh. They tried to change the subject. But eventually, they said something that revealed more than they intended. Something about you. Something that showed that the feelings never truly disappeared. And that conversation is about to become important. Because the person who heard that confession is connected to the information that will reach your soulmate next. And when it does, the emotional balance will shift completely. Your soulmate will discover something about your recent life. Something they never expected. Something that may involve a decision you made. A door you closed. A path you chose. A boundary you established. And when they understand why you made that decision, they will finally see the pain behind your silence. That is the part that may leave them speechless. They thought you were distant because you stopped caring. They may discover you were distant because you were protecting your heart. They thought you were cold. They may discover you were healing. They thought you had forgotten. They may discover you were trying desperately to remember who you were before the relationship became painful. And this realization will hit them harder than any accusation could. Because you never had to punish them. Your growth became the message. Your silence became the mirror. Your peace became the evidence. And now they are standing in front of that mirror. They are seeing themselves differently. They are seeing the choices they made. The opportunities they ignored. The words they never spoke. And they are finally understanding something that took far too long. Sometimes losing access to someone is not the same as losing the love. Sometimes distance does not erase a connection. Sometimes silence reveals it. But now comes the most important question. What will they do with this realization? Will they finally reach out? Will they tell the truth? Will they risk hearing your answer? Or will fear once again convince them to disappear? That question remains unanswered. And there is one more piece of information you have not heard yet. Something happened immediately after that conversation. Your soulmate received something. A message. A notification. A piece of information. And when they opened it, they saw something that made their entire body go still. They read it once. Then again. Then a third time. They could not believe what they were seeing. Because connected to that message was your name. And beside your name was something they never expected to see. Their heart began pounding. Their hands became still. For a moment, they could not decide whether to open it. Because they knew, somehow, that once they did, the story between you might never look the same again. They opened it. They saw the truth. And their eyes filled with emotion. Not because the news was entirely bad. Not because it was entirely good. But because it confirmed something they had secretly feared for a long time. You were moving forward. And if they wanted any place in your future, they could no longer remain trapped in the past. They sat there quietly. Thinking. Breathing. Remembering. Then they whispered something to themselves. A sentence they had never been brave enough to say aloud. I have to talk to them. And this time, they meant it. They picked up their phone. They opened your conversation. Their thumb moved toward the message box. They began typing. For the first time, the words were not coming from pride. They were not coming from jealousy. They were not coming from loneliness. They were coming from truth. I don't know if you want to hear from me. They stopped. Deleted it. Tried again. I know I have been silent. Deleted it. Again. There is something I need to tell you. They stared at those words. Their heart raced. They almost pressed send. Almost. But then something happened. A final piece of information appeared. And when they saw it, they dropped the phone onto the table. They could not move. Because the information was connected to you. And it changed the meaning of everything they had just decided to say. They stood up. Walked across the room. Came back. Picked up the phone. Read it again. Their eyes widened. Their breath became shallow. Because what they had just discovered meant one thing. The person they had been trying to forget. The person they believed had moved on. The person they assumed no longer had a place for them. Had been carrying a truth of their own. A truth they had never imagined. And now your soulmate has to decide whether to step toward you before it is too late. But there is something you still do not know. The message they received did not only contain information about you. It contained a name. A name your soulmate recognizes. A name connected to the past. A name that should not have appeared there. And the moment they saw it, their entire expression changed. Because suddenly, they understood that someone else had known the truth before they did. Someone had been watching the story unfold from a distance. Someone had information. Someone had remained silent. And now that silence was ending. Your soulmate looked at the screen again. Their finger hovered over the contact. They knew they had to make a call. But before they could press the button, another notification appeared. This one was from you. And what it said was the last thing they ever expected to read. My beloved child. The notification from you remained glowing on the screen. For several seconds, your soulmate simply stared at it. They were afraid to open it. Not because they did not want to hear from you, but because they knew that whatever was waiting inside could change everything. Their heart was pounding. Their mind was racing through every possibility. Maybe you were angry. Maybe you were saying goodbye. Maybe you were asking a question. Or maybe, somehow, after all this time, you were giving them one final opportunity to tell the truth. They finally opened the message. And the moment they read your words, everything inside them became quiet. You had not written a long paragraph. You had not blamed them. You had not demanded an explanation. You had simply said something that reached deeper than any accusation could. You told them that you hoped they were doing well. That was all. But to your soulmate, Those few words carried the weight of everything that had remained unsaid. They read them again. Then again. And suddenly, tears appeared in their eyes. Because they realized something painful. Even after everything, there was still kindness in your heart. You had every reason to be bitter. Yet you were not trying to hurt them. You were simply acknowledging their existence. And that broke the final wall they had built around themselves. They whispered your name. Then they began typing. This time, they did not delete the message. They wrote exactly what they had been afraid to say. They admitted that they had missed you. They admitted that they had thought about contacting you many times. They admitted that pride and fear had controlled them. And most importantly, they admitted that they had never truly stopped caring. Their finger hovered over send. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then they pressed it. The message was gone. Delivered. And now there was nothing left to hide behind. They put the phone down and waited. A minute passed. Then another. No response. Their anxiety grew. They wondered whether they had made a terrible mistake. Then your reply appeared. And this time, your soulmate's heart stopped for a completely different reason. You did not reject them. You did not immediately forgive them either. You simply told them that if they truly wanted to talk, they needed to be honest. No games. No half-truths. No disappearing when emotions became difficult. Your soulmate read those words and understood. This was not the old connection returning. This was a new beginning requiring new behavior. They took a deep breath. For the first time, they were not thinking about how to win you back. They were thinking about how to become worthy of being trusted again. And that realization changed everything. My beloved child, sometimes the greatest answer is not a dramatic reunion. Sometimes it is the moment when two people finally stop running from the truth. Your soulmate had spent so long wondering whether you still cared. Now they knew. But they also understood something else. Your love could no longer be taken for granted. If they wanted a place in your future, they would have to earn it through consistency, honesty, and courage. That night, they made a decision. They would meet you. Not through another endless conversation on a screen. Not through hints. Not through someone else. Face to face. They wanted to look into your eyes and finally say everything they had carried in silence. And when the meeting happened, there was a moment when neither of you spoke. You simply looked at each other. Years of emotion seemed to exist inside that silence. Then your soulmate said the words they had been unable to say for so long. I was afraid of losing you, so I behaved like I didn't need you. You remained quiet. They continued. I thought I had more time. Their voice broke. I was wrong. Those words reached the deepest place in your heart. Not because they erased the past. They did not. But because they were honest. Your soulmate finally understood that an apology is not supposed to erase consequences. It is supposed to acknowledge them. They told you about the moments they regretted. The nights they wanted to call. The times they almost came back. The people who gave them advice. The fears that kept them away. And then they told you about the moment they discovered the truth about you. They said that was when they realized they could no longer pretend. You listened. You did not rush. You did not promise anything. And that was exactly what made the moment powerful. You were no longer desperate for an answer. You were listening from a place of self-respect. Your soulmate noticed that. And for the first time, they saw the person you had become. Stronger. Calmer. More confident. Still capable of love, but no longer willing to lose yourself inside it. They realized that the person they had once taken for granted had grown into someone they could not approach casually anymore. Then came the question. Your soulmate looked directly into your eyes and asked, "Is there still a chance for us?" The room became silent. You took a breath. And instead of giving them an immediate yes or no, you told them something they would remember forever. "You cannot ask me to return to what hurt me. If we begin again, we have to build something different." Your soulmate nodded. There was no argument. No defense. Only acceptance. They finally understood. The old version of your relationship had ended. But perhaps something healthier could begin. Not because destiny forced it. Not because a sign guaranteed it. But because two people were finally willing to choose honesty. And that was the real miracle. My beloved child, if you are listening to this fictional spiritual story and recognizing pieces of your own heart inside it, remember this. You do not have to chase someone to prove that you are lovable. You do not have to beg someone to recognize your worth. You do not have to abandon your boundaries just because someone finally realizes what they lost. Let people show you through actions. Let consistency speak. Let honesty speak. Let time reveal what words cannot. If someone returns, let them return with clarity. If someone apologizes, let their behavior support the apology. If someone says they love you, let their choices demonstrate that love. And if someone does not return, remember that your worth was never dependent upon their decision. You are still worthy. You are still deserving of peace. You are still deserving of a love that does not make you question whether you matter. In this story, your soulmate finally understood that. They realized that the person they were desperately trying to reach was never waiting for rescue. You were learning to stand on your own. And that was precisely what made them want to become better. The future was no longer guaranteed. But for the first time, neither of you needed guarantees. You only needed truth. Your soulmate reached for your hand. Slowly. Carefully. And this time, they did not assume you would take it. They waited. You looked at their hand. Then you looked into their eyes. And after everything that had happened, you made your choice. Not because you were afraid of losing them. Not because you were lonely. But because, in that moment, you believed their actions deserved one more conversation. One more chance to prove that this time could be different. The story did not end with a perfect promise. It ended with something more meaningful. A beginning. A beginning built on honesty instead of fear. And as the two of you walked forward, your soulmate quietly realized something. The devastating news they had received had not destroyed their world. It had awakened them. It forced them to confront what they had avoided. It showed them what mattered. And perhaps that was the hidden purpose of the entire journey. Not to make you chase them. Not to make them dependent upon you. But to bring truth into the light. So if your heart is waiting for clarity, breathe. Do not force the door. Do not break your own peace trying to reach someone. Let what is real reveal itself. And remember this final message. What belongs in your life will not require you to destroy yourself to keep it. Love should meet you with courage. Love should meet you with respect. Love should meet you with truth. And sometimes, the person who once ran away must travel through their own darkness before they finally understand the light they walked away from. In this fictional story, your soulmate finally turned around. They finally spoke. They finally stopped pretending. And when they looked at you again, they were no longer asking you to save them. They were simply asking for the opportunity to show you who they had become. Whether you accept that opportunity is your choice. And that is the most powerful part of the story. Because the final decision was never theirs. It was yours.